Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Career Lightning Talks, Job Search Strategies. We're happy that you can join us this morning. We know it's a little bit early, but we have lots of great information to share with you, and we're really excited. So before we get started, we always like to thank our members and donors of the Alumni Association for making our alumni webinar series possible. So if you're a member or donor out there, thank you so much for joining us, for making this alumni webinar series possible, and thank you for joining us as well. So we also have a couple of upcoming webinars that you might be interested in, such as the future of work for Gen Z in the workplace, career transitions after 50, and attracting and supporting and retaining professionals of color in MSP, as well as Staffing Agencies 101. So if you're tuning in right now and you'd like to also maybe listen in by phone, if you're busy and you just want to listen in by phone, this is another great option. You can see the information on your screen. Just dial that number and enter the webinar ID. So I'm Rebecca Luebbert. I'm the Director of Career and Business Engagement with the University of Minnesota Alumni Association. While I'm new to my role, and this is a new position, I am not new to career services. Previous to this role, I worked at the College of Biological Sciences, where I led career services. And previous to that, I worked at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign at the Centralized Career Center there, serving students and alumni. And then I've also held various roles at Florida International University in Miami, Florida. Our next presenter today is Marissa Smith. Marissa Smith is the Director of Student and Recent Engagements with the University of Minnesota Alumni Association. Her 11-year career in higher education at the University of Minnesota has focused on ensuring that students have a smooth transition into university life and transformative experience once they are on campus and as alumni. Steph Iden is the Assistant Director and MERF Advisor and Internship Coordinator with Career and Professional Development at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs. She attended the University of Minnesota Duluth, and her professional experiences include academic advising, career counseling, event planning, and she enjoys helping students set goals and engage in professional development opportunities. Jennifer Geyer-Wood is the Director and MPA Advisor with the Career and Professional Development at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs. Jennifer manages all aspects of career services and collaborates with student services, alumni relations, development, and many other partners to serve students from first contact to graduation and beyond. Jennifer has worked in higher education since 1997, both in student affairs and university advancement, and is passionate about helping students succeed. Rebecca Dordell is a senior career coach in the Carlson School of Management Undergraduate Career Center. She's worked in higher education for the past 10 years with previous roles in the College of Biological Sciences, College of Science Engineering, and at the University of Virginia. These are all of our speakers today. So before we get started, I just want to go over some of the topics I'll be discussing. We'll start first with best job search tips or advice and key resources. We'll do that for about 7 minutes, and then we'll go into guidance and resources for building a network. Then what you should know about resumes, so some key pointers in terms of what you should be thinking about when developing a resume. And then interviewing and interviewing tips, so how to make the most out of your interview. And then lastly, we'll focus on 30 minutes just on job search strategies and have Q&A, and that will also involve career decision making as well. So if you're still thinking about how to where to get started, we'll also that session will be for more information on that topic. So we promised 7 minutes on each of these topics, so I'll get started on job search strategies. So in the job search, I think it's really important to be ready. And I know right now it's trying times for many people. Lots of students are readjusting to integrating both their school and home life and balancing a lot of different maybe roles and responsibilities in addition to their schoolwork. And so it's really important to be ready to engage in career development work, which can take time, patience, and energy. And finding that time and figuring out ways to incorporate that into your schedule will be really important. And so when you are in a good position and you're ready to engage in this work, that will make it a little bit easier. And so sometimes that might mean waiting until a better time. Maybe it is after the semester ends, or maybe it is just taking your time and doing a little bit of this work on a weekly basis, but really listening to what your needs are and incorporating a schedule for you that makes sense. I would also say be flexible. Being flexible can mean stretching ourselves beyond what we had initially imagined. And so, you know, many students have been looking forward to in-person internships or looking forward to starting their entry-level job with in-person onboarding, but being flexible to the opportunities that might be out there for you that are maybe different than you had imagined. So thinking about maybe micro internships that might be available, and there's some resources for that I'll point you towards. Looking at lesser known companies such as startups are also a good resource that might be looking for new grads or new talent. Also thinking about if it's possible and it's within your abilities to look beyond different geographic preferences. So maybe expanding your job search to be a wider geographic preference might be a good place to start. And then considering growing industries. So thinking about maybe grocers or tech companies or healthcare. A lot of times companies have a lot of the same basic positions. So if you're kind of looking at different positions that are more general in nature, such as human resources, marketing, or things of that nature, a lot of companies have a lot of those basic departments that help that company run. And so kind of expanding your job search to looking at different companies than maybe you had thought about originally. And then also, if you can, volunteer opportunities are another great way to kind of build experiences and keep building your momentum in terms of gaining experiences that expose you to maybe workplaces or projects that are skill building in nature. And, you know, a lot of times students are really focused on internships and that title of an internship and what that looks like. But a lot of employers are really open to different experiences and really drawing from that, the transferable skills that you gain from that experience. Yes, so I mentioned volunteering and then being on a mission. So knowing that this is going to take some work. You probably have heard this adage before, like searching for a job is a job in itself. And that's what it can feel like and what it will be like at some moments. But being patient with this process is really important. So it's not easy. It can be time intensive, but it can be manageable. And so thinking about how you schedule this into your schedule. So that might mean setting aside, if you're a current student or you're actively employed right now and you're looking at a transition, maybe it's 6 to 8 hours a week that you're dedicating to the job search process. If you're unemployed, maybe that looks like more like 20 to 30 hours a week, and really thinking about, you know, what that looks like. And that might look like creating a schedule. So maybe that's 1 hour doing, you know, resume updating, 1 hour searching for a job, and then 1 hour, you know, networking or looking for people to network with. And then, yes, so that's that part. And then kind of a catch-all here on the slide, I think what's really important in the job search process is to really define your interests, skills, and abilities, because it's really hard for others to know how you might fit with their company or different opportunities if you're having a hard time articulating what those interests, skills, and abilities are. I know lots of times where, you know, we just want a job, but it's important to also know what you like and what you don't like and help create that story so that others can help identify experiences that might be of interest to you. And then research your occupation or industry of interest. So that means becoming sort of a mini expert in knowing what this industry is of interest of yours or what this occupation is. And so that could be looking at professional associations. So there are many professional associations out there, such as professionals of like American Association of Human Resources, I'm just making this up, or American Association of Public Health, and looking at those sort of resources to really understand the industry, know what's going on, looking at the websites of the different companies of interest, following them on LinkedIn, knowing what their story is, like knowing what their mission, their vision is, their products, their services are, and really knowing all about them. And this will help arm you with information that you'll use in preparation for the actual interview, or in preparation in general. So like your resume, your cover letter, and your interview, you're gonna need all this information for that part of the process later on. And of course, building connections. And so building connections can come in different forms. And so, you know, there are people that you already know that you have a connection with. Maybe they're friends of friends or professors or or maybe members of a student organization or another organization that you're a part of. And with those people, those contacts you have, you can openly share that you're actively looking for employment. And then there's other connections like recruiters. And so with those connections, you can find recruiters on LinkedIn, you can find recruiters in GoalPass and befriend them. You can reach out to those and you can let them know that you're actively looking for employment and what you're looking for. And then there are others that you may not know and you want to know and you want to learn more about the industry. And those are, you know, people who are in that profession that are doing something you might want to do. And those would be good places to begin. A good place to begin learning more about the profession by making contact with those professionals. And Marissa will talk a little bit more about networking in a little bit. And then effectively using job boards. So a lot of times when we're using a job board, we're like, oh, there's nothing in there for me. We do a search, we're not sure where to start, but a lot of times we're not effectively using them. So filtering them for entry-level positions. Entry-level usually means a bachelor's degree or just a bachelor's degree and a few years of experience. Making sure that your job profile is completely filled out. So like in GoalPass, there's a place for career interests, and that's where you indicate whether you're looking for full-time experience, if you're looking for a particular industry of interest like the biological sciences, and like geographic preferences and things of that nature. And when you do this, like it helps alert recruiters like what you're looking for. And when I've used GoalPass, and I put myself in there as a student, I have recruiters reaching out to me, telling me like, oh, this information session is coming up or this job's available. And so that is a really effective way of using the job board and putting the job board to work for you. Also create job alerts. And that might look like, and you can label your job alerts. So if you're looking for jobs like in Minnesota or looking for jobs in Illinois, like you can label those job searches. And the way you do that is just by initiating an initial job search, like you're just searching for jobs and then you save that job search. So letting that job board really work for you. And then it's all about keywords. So another thing, sometimes we say we're not sure what we're looking for, but there's often things that you might like or enjoy based on coursework or topics of interest or things that you've engaged with in the past, or just knowing some things that you really spark your interest or that energize you. And so thinking about what those are and maybe taking some time to write down those things that you really enjoy can spark some of these keywords that you can use in your job search engines. So instead of just blankly looking for jobs, you can then type in like marketing or writing or project management or data. So like kind of thinking about the different ways you might like to work. And those keywords are really essential in different ways. It's important to have keywords that mirror the job description. So when you do a job search and you find job descriptions, really exciting, like highlight those keywords in that job description and write those down somewhere so you know what those keywords are, so that when you do another job search in the future, you're searching based on the types of things that you enjoy. And then begin incorporating and mirroring some of those keywords in your resume and cover letter, because that will just help highlight some of the things that you're really interested in. And a lot of times these job search engines and LinkedIn and other resources are crawlers. So they work on an algorithm that pick up these keywords, and when recruiters search for you, they're also searching for you based on keywords. And staying organized. So stay organized means keep a spreadsheet, like know all the jobs you applied for, the company name, the company title, the date you applied, the date you follow up. Yes, you need to follow up. If it says do not contact them. And then, who you address that cover letter to. And yes, you need to personally address that cover letter if you can find the information. So keeping that in a spreadsheet, and then having another document where you copy and paste all the job descriptions, because once that job closes, that job description will go away. And if someone calls you for an interview and you have no idea what they're talking about, that's just going to look poorly. So definitely, if you have this information, we know you're applying for multiple jobs, but definitely make it seem like you're really focused and you're well organized. And I think that will help give you the upper hand. And then always submit a cover letter and submit a tailored cover letter. So avoid generic cover letters. And with every job application you submit, you must submit a cover letter. Recruiters are looking for cover letters. It helps shine why you're interested in a particular position, and it gives you an opportunity opportunity to really explain some of those transferable skills and what you did and why it's connected to what you want to do. So you're making your sell in some ways on your cover letter. And then on the for your resume, a lot of times recruiters are you know, they don't have a lot of time. Maybe they have like hundreds of resumes. So your resume should be easy to read, easy to navigate. And a lot of times employers only spend 15 to 30 seconds like scanning your resume before they decide they want to move on. And so next we're going to go into some resources. So these are some resources I mentioned here. There's a whole list of like companies that are hiring right now. Gold Pass, there's a list of 500 companies that are hiring right now in Gold Pass, which is that last link on the slide. And these resources I will share after the webinar along with the slides and the recording of this webinar. So I won't spend too much time on this slide. And next we have Marissa who will go into networking.
All right, thanks, Rebecca. So many great tips and strategies already being shared. And as Rebecca mentioned, finding new connections and networking can be an excellent strategy in your job search. And so I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the value of networking, how to do it, and then share one specific tool that you all as University of Minnesota community members have access to that's already proving to be incredibly useful for University of Minnesota students and alumni. So Rebecca, you can go to the next slide. So I know that for those of you joining today, your preconceived notions about networking may be all over the place. For some of you, the idea of meeting someone new, having a conversation, sharing your interests, sharing your goals is super energizing, and you're missing it right now because we're stuck in our homes. For others of you, you are very confused or confounded about networking, and the idea of it sounds really scary. And you haven't even maybe tried it yet. And so you've maybe tuned in simply to just learn a little bit more about what networking is and get some tips so that you can get started. And then there might be a wide swath of us in the middle who understand its importance, who are on board, but could use some additional practice. And so I just want to normalize wherever you are on that spectrum is okay. Networking is simply a tool that you can use to help with your job search. And there are a lot of definitions of networking out there, but I wanted to share one for you to consider, which might help it feel a little bit more approachable. And that is that networking is the act of building a community around shared professional and academic interests. So it's really about connecting with folks and bringing them into your community to hopefully advance your career. And that I hope contrasts a little bit with some of our notions around meeting someone at an event and talking about the weather and exchanging business cards and having it feel very transactional. No matter what you think about networking, it is a very valuable way to get ahead in the job search. I know that networking has played a role in every single job transition that I've had, so I can be a personal testament to the value of networking. And Rebecca, if you want to go to the next. So what are some different ways of networking? There are a lot of strategies out there, including events, referrals, and online. Events are obviously on hold right now. However, many organizations are pivoting to virtual events. The Alumni Association included is going to start hosting some virtual networking events soon where you can still connect with new people and get information that you can use. So events are an option. Referrals can be tremendously useful. So this is thinking about who am I already connected to and who do they know that could give me some tools to explore career pathways. This can feel really comfortable because you're starting with folks that already know and hopefully support you. So think about who's in your immediate circle, peers, family members, family friends, current supervisors, current coworkers, and who do they know that you might want to connect with to expand your knowledge. And then online, using online search tools to find people to contact for career advice and mentorship. This might include things like LinkedIn or Gold Pass or the Maroon and Gold Network, which I'll share with you very soon. Couple additional ways to build your network that you might not have already thought about: student organizations. So if you are currently a student or a recent grad, you may have connected with student organizations, and these are places that already share your mutual interests. So who do you know there that you could build a connection with? Professional associations that are affiliated with industries or specific careers, and then alumni networks. And I want to spend just another second talking about the power of the alumni community. You all, and you can go to the next slide, Rebecca, are connected to an incredibly powerful alumni community. We have nearly 500,000 alumni worldwide, and any class of 2020 grads out there, you all are going to be the ones that push us over that 500,000 mark. So we're really excited about that. And it's not just the quantity, it's the quality. These graduates are talented. They are hardworking, they are inspiring, they are literally on the front lines right now, helping our world repair itself. And there is nothing that a fellow grad wouldn't do to help a student or recent grad get ahead in their career path. So you can feel really confident reaching out to a fellow grad to say, hey, I'm interested in learning more about your career path and what advice you might have for someone in my spot right now. And so the Alumni Association is here to help make that process a little easier, but you can start doing that as early as today. Go to the next slide. One of the ways that we make this easier, Rebecca, if you want to go to the next slide, is through a platform that we've invested in called the Maroon and Gold Network. And if any of you have not heard of the Maroon and Gold Network yet, I want to give you just a little bit of an overview of what it is and how to use it. So the Maroon and Gold Network is a free online platform for career-related advice, networking, and mentorship exclusively for the University of Minnesota community. This platform is special because for two primary reasons. One, all of the alumni on the platform have raised their hand specifically to help students and fellow alumni in their career path. So they're sitting there, they're waiting, they're ready to hear from you, and have been very specific about the ways that they're able to help. And then students, you all can connect with alumni on the platform to accelerate your career. Go to the next slide. We are just passing 6,000 users on the Maroon and Gold Network, which is incredible. Of those users, we have about 3,600 alumni, 2,500 students. We're in 46 states plus the District of Columbia and 35 countries. And here you can see a heat map of where our alumni are, and it would match what you would expect. A lot of our alumni stay right in the Twin Cities area, but we do have alumni that are in Chicago or Seattle or on the East Coast as well. So if you're looking to connect with alumni in different geographical areas, the Maroon and Gold Network is a great place to do it. In terms of what people are asking for help about, most people on the Maroon and Gold Network are using it to find informational interviews, but others are looking for introductions to others in their field, job search strategies, the very topic we're here to address, transitioning to life after school, job shadowing, and job interview strategies. And we know that we have participants on today's webinar from all the schools and colleges across the U, and there are majors in the Maroon and Gold Network across all the schools and colleges in the U. So that's really exciting as well. The feedback that we've been hearing about the Maroon and Gold Network has been really positive. Nearly all interactions are rated as meaningful. And here's just one example of a student and an alum that connected. The student writes, Gregory was responsive, easy to schedule a time to meet with, and had a lot of valuable insight into nonprofit development and where to start with grant writing. And the alum writes, I enjoyed meeting with a current student to discuss career paths in the nonprofit sector. It was a great experience for me as her questions helped me reflect on career experiences and refocus my goals and passions. So as you can see from this example, alumni want to help and can find the experience helpful in and of themselves. So this is the website to get started. We'll include this in our follow-up email, but I do hope that as you embark on this unusual time for job searching, that you consider the Maroon and Gold Network. It's one of the tools in your toolbox to be able to help you get ahead. And if you have any questions or suggestions about this platform, please don't hesitate to reach out. You've got this. Go Gophers. Skayuma.
All right, thank you, Marissa. And thank you everybody again for being here on this really sunny Friday morning. Hopefully it's sunny wherever you are as well. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about resumes. So if you want to go to the next slide. Okay, so when we're thinking about how to stay out of the no pile, as Rebecca had mentioned before, sometimes employers only have 15 seconds to look at your resume. Sometimes they have longer, so you really want to make it scannable. And I always think like the two most important things where you should spend the most of your time on your resume is writing strong skill statements and tailoring. So those are the two things that I'm gonna talk most about today. I did want to put a little aside though before I get into that I've heard a lot of employers tell me that when you're submitting your materials online, to submit it as a PDF and then making sure that you have it titled with your name and the position that you're applying for, because if they do a batch download and you don't have your name or the position on there, then they have to search through everybody's to find what they're looking for. So writing good skill statements. Really, this is probably about 50% of your effort that will go into your resume is writing these strong skill statements. And the skill statements are those bulleted statements that are within your experiences that describe what you did. But one of the things I see a lot of people do is really focus on just what they did and not how they did it. But the employers really want to understand how did you do it. So for example, if you did research with a faculty, the research that you did with a faculty versus another student could look very different. So just saying like researched, this problem, they won't really know what that means. So it's really important in your skill statements to emphasize the skills that you did and to be a little bit more specific, because that helps show the complexity of what you've done. So you might say, for the research example, you might tell them, did you do a literature review? Did you interview people? Were you out in the field? What did that look like? But within that, it's still important to stay concise, because as we know, you only have so much information. So you have to choose your wording really carefully. Next slide. So to help you keep them concise, there is this formula that you can use for your skill statements, which is strong action verb plus details plus results. So pretty much all of your statements will start with a strong action verb, and I advocate for these to be strong action verbs. So not using things like worked, responsible for, duties included. You want to use action verbs that give you some oomph, like collaborated, designed, created, managed. It's important to use a variety of them as well. So you wouldn't want to use collaborated over and over and over again. And that's really easy to do, because once you get one you like, then you sort of forget about other ones. But I use thesaurus.com. Another thing, a lot of your colleges might have action verb lists that they have on their website or that they can provide you, or you can Google them to give you some ideas to vary them. And then making sure that you're using the correct verb tense on them. And then for the details, this is where you really want to get into that nitty gritty of what you did and how you did it. So this will include the who, what, where, how, and why of what you did. This is where you could quantify. So if you went out into the field and interviewed people for your research, you might say interviewed 30 participants. You can talk about the knowledge or the competencies that you use. So some analysis, maybe some negotiation, maybe some listening, including those words in there. And then the meat of this is the results. So employers really want to know what was the impact that you made, because they're going to assume that's the impact that you can make with them. So you want to finish it in some kind of result. I interviewed 30 people to understand the impact of this policy on their career, or something similar to that. So really help the employer understand what you did when you did your job well. So an example on the next slide is, instead of just saying responsible for data, you could say analyzed annual property tax data in Stata for inclusion in official county report for residents. So that tells the employer a lot more information. And if you go to the next slide, I included some employer results here. So the University of Minnesota does an employer survey, and you can see highlighted in these three statements that The employers really want to understand these tangible results again. So, you know, if you've saved the company money through an internship, tell them how much, because they want to see what they can expect you to do for them and how you can help their organization. So sell yourself a little bit and help paint a picture of what you did and how you did it and why it's relevant. So then the next thing that I'll talk about is a tailored resume. And Rebecca mentioned earlier that this is really, really important as well. So tailoring a resume is when you look at a job description and then you adjust your cover letter and your resume to match what the employer is looking for in the job description. And there's two different ways that you can do this. One is through your formatting. So you might choose bolding or italics that will highlight certain information. So in this example, you can see the person highlighted the name of their job. So community relations intern, they bolded that. So if you thought that the title of your position was really important, you might bold that. If you think the company is really important, like if you really wanted them to know that you work for Travelers Insurance, then you might move Travelers Insurance above community relations and bold that. So it's just sort of thinking a lot very intentionally about how you format your resume to pull the information. The other way that you can tailor information, if you go to the next slide, is through your actual content. And so there's a couple ways that you can tailor your content to meet what the employer is looking for. So you might select certain experiences and skill statements to go on your resume. I advocate for students to have a running resume and then pull certain experiences or certain skill statements off of it for every position that they're applying for. So you might not include everything every single time. Another thing is your word choice. So this is looking at some of the keywords in the job description, some of the things that they're looking for, and actually importing those into your resume. So if they're talking about organization or teamwork or collaboration, making sure you have those keywords in your resume. And then your organizational structure. So how you organize your resume can be really, really helpful. A lot of times I see students put work experience and volunteer experience. And you can do that, but you don't have to. You can say so much more with some headers. So if you want to go to the next slide, I can talk through the headers. So what you can do is you can break up your experience into certain topic areas or skill areas. So you could do, again, if you were doing research and you were applying for a position that was a research position that focused on psychology, you might have one section of your resume say psychology experience, and then one section of your resume would say research experience. And then when the employer is looking at it for only 15 seconds, they know that you have some experience with psychology and they know that you have some experience with research. So then you could organize the rest of your experiences within there, and you don't have to have it broken up into paid work and volunteer work. You can be creative with this. So you really want to choose some categories that match what they're looking for in the job description. You might change the names of your headers for different things that you're applying for. It might not stay the same every time, and you might reorganize your experiences every time that you apply for something to bring up the information higher that you want to highlight. But making sure that you don't have too many categories. You don't want a category and one experience, a category, one experience, a category and one experience, because that would just be really hard to look at. And because you want it to be easy for your employer to read. So utilize your career services to help you with some of this tailoring. And what I do is have students send me a job description and their resume so I can see if the student has tailored appropriately. You can go to the next slide. So this is an example. It's a little bit hard to see, but you can see here how the person used housing and community development experience, and then they have other professional experience listed there. So that's a little bit of their tailoring. And this can be really helpful if you have a really relevant position that you did a long time ago, because you can move that up into a category. So that is what I have for resumes. Again, the two most important things I think are tailoring and spending some time on your skill statements, and then of course having your resume reviewed before you submit it.
Excellent. Thank you, Steph. I'm Jen Geyer-Wood, and I'm so excited to be talking with so many of you today, so many students and alums. A little tiny extra shout out to our Humphrey folks on the call today, on the webinar today. I love talking about interviewing, and we're going to really focus on a little bit about the whole interview process and my favorite strategy for making sure that you're prepared to interview successfully. Let's move on to the next slide. So first I want to talk about just to preview the steps to a successful interview. And so if you've ever worked with career services, or if you've ever had an interview signed that you've scheduled, you probably know that the first step is to prepare, and we'll talk a little bit about how you might want to do that. In this world right now, a lot of the interviews are moving online for virtual interviews or perhaps phone interviews. So I added a step in there, which was test, and we'll talk through that a little bit. The next step is interviewing, of course, and the final step, we'll talk a little bit about follow-up. So I want you to take a step back and think about why the employer is interviewing you, right? They want to see if you're a good fit for the position. So really what they're trying to do is assess how your competencies, your skills, your experiences, and your qualifications match the requirements for the position. So always keep that in mind as you prepare for your interview. They're also looking a little bit at the fit with the organization as well. So what your goal is to really communicate that you fit their needs. So that's a great perspective to think about as you prepare for an interview. So I really think that the first step is to understand the organization. So you'll probably do a little research. It's great these days. There's so much online that you can understand, including their missions, their goals, their needs. That's really, really important as you frame yourself for the interview. The next step is to look at the position and any additional information you have. And this is one of the most important steps. I really love analyzing position descriptions, really focusing on those required and those preferred qualifications, but also kind of thinking about it in themes. What is it that I can read between the lines about this position? What type of person are they looking for? What skills? What's most important to them? And I also want to cue you to think about additional information. So if you were listening before and if you've done a lot of networking, you might have talked to people who work there or people who have a strong connection with that organization. And you may have gathered some additional intel about what it's like to work there, what their goals are, what they're looking for. And so use that as you kind of prepare for that interview. Use that framework. The next step is what we're going to spend most of our time on today, and that's preparing your STAR stories. So I'm not going to talk about that much now. But next, you would also develop a list of questions that you want to ask the interviewer or interviewers. I think this is really important. It shows a lot of things. It shows that you're interested in the position and that you're inquisitive, that you're taking this seriously, but also it can help you to, again, gather a little bit more information about the organization and the position. I really like to think of it like you're interviewing them as well as they're interviewing you, and this is your chance to ask them questions. Determine what you'll wear, we'll talk a little bit about that, and make your travel and technology plans. Let's move on to the next slide. So test and practice, this is so important. If you're conducting a virtual interview, you'll want to test your computer and whatever software or whatever it is that they're going to use prior to the interview. We're all used to using Zoom, they may use Skype, they may have you call in, but make sure that you test that out. If it's a video interview, make sure that your background looks appropriate. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but it just needs to be appropriate. And we've all seen some of those memes and some of the fails with people on their Zoom meetings. Make sure that your roommates and anybody who's with you knows that you're doing an interview so you don't have one of those things happen, right? Determine your backup plan. I have a very funny story about an interview for a job that I actually got, where I had spilled a beverage on my laptop the night before, thought it was working fine, and then in the middle of the interview, the laptop just zapped and went out. But I had been prepared, and so I had my phone there, I had an iPad there, and I was able to kind of move on a dime and make sure that I could continue the interview. And that actually made me look good, because they knew that I could troubleshoot and that I was prepared for a lot of different things. Another thing that I do is for example, with Zoom, you can have a call-in number. I have the number on hand so that it's easy for me to call in if something were to happen. Let's move on to the next slide. And oh, this is a fun one. I love working on STAR strategies with students and with alums. So what I always do, I do this myself when I interview as well, take a step back. So all of this preparation that you've already done, all the information that you have about the employer and about the position, take a step back and think about, what are the skills and experiences that this employer is looking for? So using those required qualifications is really important. When you think about this. What I do, and I really recommend that you do this, make a list, okay? So if they're looking for written communication skills, write that on a piece of paper, or write it on your computer. If they're looking for certain technical skills, or if they're looking for attention to detail, make a list on a piece of paper or on your computer and have all those. And then your next step is to really think about what you've done, your accomplishments, your experience, and think about a time when you've successfully used that skill or you've successfully done that thing. So you might think about a time when you've used written communication very successfully, and you might have an outcome that you have to show for it, or something that you could really describe for an employer. So you have this list of skills, you've jotted down something about your experiences, and then we're going to move on to the next slide and show you how to describe this using the STAR framework. I really love this framework. If you may have seen this in different ways. Sometimes it's called SAR, sometimes it's called PAR, sometimes there's an extra R at the end. But basically, it's a framework for how you answer these questions. It was developed at first to answer behavioral questions. I'm not sure if you all know what behavioral questions are, but one of the key signals to a behavioral question is that it might start out, tell me about a time when you blank, which is really great because employers are getting that information about a time when you've actually used those skills. Well, if you switch this around and think about answering many of your questions that you get in an interview with actual examples, it can be really powerful. So you start with the situation. So what was going on? What is the background here? Then you move on to the task. What is it that you actually were supposed to accomplish? Next, you move on to the action. What action did you take? What did you do? And finally, the results. How did this turn out? And that's where, remember when Steph was talking about accomplishments and quantifying and all those great things in a resume? The results tend to be where you can use those things when you're interviewing as well. Let's move on to the next slide and really delve into this. So I have a sample here. So we're starting with the situation and task. And for me, a lot of times those are really tightly partnered together, but you can kind of see where it shifts from what was going on to what you had to do. So here in my position as the executive director of the Minnesota Public Policy Association, I was responsible for managing our budget and setting fundraising goals. So that's kind of the background. As I evaluated our programs, I discovered that we were not meeting the financial goals of our annual gala and that this was impacting our overall budget. I had to increase our income by 80% or eliminate the gala. So that's really the task. This person had to come up with a way to increase the income or eliminate the gala. Let's move on to the next slide and the next step, which is going to be action. So this is what you needed to do. So this person developed a short survey to send to members in a monthly newsletter to generate some ideas about the gala. Then using this feedback in their analysis, they gathered the planning committee and sponsors for a half-day retreat to develop a strategy to improve the gala. So this is what they did. They used the feedback and they gathered a group together to develop a strategy. Let's move on to the last part, the result. Through changing our gala to a reception increasing sponsor visibility and producing a virtual follow-up event, we decreased expenses by $25,000 yearly and increased our revenue by 80% the first year and 90% the second year. So you can see we used, we quantified, we show a result. So instead of this person saying, yeah, I know how to do financial analysis, I know how to gather a group of folks together to come up with a plan, that's good, right? But when you give this example, it seems so much more real, and it can really help employers to understand not only the skills you have, but how you use them. I like this for a lot of reasons. Of course, like I mentioned, the tangible examples are great for employers. A lot of times the best thing they have to go on is that the best predictor for future behavior is past behavior. The other thing I like about this is it helps to regulate the length of your answers, and it can ground them in reality. So if you are concerned about your answers being too short or too long, these STAR examples can help you to regulate that, because there's a beginning, middle, and an end. It also helps to ground your answers in reality. I've worked with a lot of alums and students who say, I don't like interviews because it sounds like I'm bragging. It doesn't sound like this stuff is real, but if you ground it in examples, it is real and it doesn't feel like bragging. For me, I'll admit I have some control issues, and when I'm nervous, it helps me to feel more like I'm in control of the interview. So if I have come up with all of the skills and experiences I want employers to know that I can do, and I've really thought through my examples, I feel like I have an agenda for my interview and I know what I want to talk about, and in general, it really happens. It can also help you when you focus on your experiences in these stories. If you get one of those unexpected behavioral questions, tell me about a time when your mind has already been going over all the experiences you have, and a lot of times you'll be much more likely to come up with one of those examples. So I really love the STAR piece, but there's one last step that's super important, and that's follow-up. And I want everybody to think a little bit about your follow-up, especially with what's happening now. I recommend a personal emailed thank you to those who interviewed you. I really, really think that that's important. And what I recommend email rather than a written thank you right now, because it's more immediate. So employers might be making decisions very quickly and they'll get that email right away. And especially now, there are some organizations, if they're working from home, they aren't really getting mail. So I think that the follow-up is really super important as you consider your interviews. So I hope this helped. The STAR is really the focus of how you prepare for an interview, but all of the pieces are really important. Let's move on to job search strategies.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca Dordell, and again, I'm with the Carlson School of Management, and I'm here to chat with you a little bit more about some concrete job search strategies as you move forward in this process. All right, so in my work with students over the past 10 years, one of the things that I've realized as I'm working with students in organizing their job search process is the analogy that it's a marathon, not a sprint. You really want to think about, what is this process and how can I go about it in a way that matches my preferences and how I like to do two key things, which is gathering information and analyzing information, and really allowing that information to inform your decisions. And so when I first start to work with students as they're beginning their job search, I like to ask them a couple of quick questions about how they like to gather their information and what information they trust. And the really key example in the dichotomies of gathering information and information that people trust is really based on reading and researching versus interacting with others in hands-on experience. So I want you to think about how you like to gather information throughout your undergraduate experience already. Were you someone who spent a lot of time doing research and spending more time on gathering data, or were you more about the individual lived experiences of others? For example, informational interviewing and networking. The second piece I like to talk about is, what information do you generally trust? Are you someone who likes data and information, or again, do you like talking to the individual people about their lived experience? So I'm going to walk you through just kind of 4 key ways that we like to think about these dichotomies, and I want you to think, what seems most relevant or in preference with how you like to go through this process. Because again, the job search is about gathering information and making decisions in a way that is comfortable to you, and that will make this process so much easier and more comfortable, and will get you motivated to continue to engage as you go through this process, which as a 2008 grad, the previous recession, I know can take a while. So let's work through some of those options, Rebecca. Okay, so external decision makers. These are folks who really like to think about their decisions out loud. So if you're someone who really likes to process your job search or thinking about a major decision with others, or even someone who likes to talk to themselves, that might be an indicator that you're an external decision maker. These people also may be skilled at arguing all sides of an issue, and they really may find it incredibly valuable to talk to others before making a decision. These folks, again, tend to have the qualities of talking and then thinking. You may recognize that the external decision makers also sounds like people who tend to have a preference for extroversion on the Myers-Briggs type indicator. Our next type of decision maker is the internal decision maker. Can we get the next slide, Rebecca? Internal decision makers tend to have more preferences for introversion. They may analyze problems silently and privately. They may need time to organize their thoughts. They tend to be more introspective, and they tend to think and then talk. And we'll talk a little bit about why these preferences are really important as you engage in the job search. Can I have the next slide, Rebecca? So systematic decision makers, they really prefer to gather a great deal of information before they make decisions. They tend not to act impulsively, and they're cautious about making commitments. They also choose goals and work towards them deliberately, and they're analytical and use logic when making decisions. So again, think about how you've made large decisions in the past, whether that was choosing your undergraduate major or choosing your college. Does this type of approach seem to resonate with you, or does our next decision-making process resonate with you, which is our next slide, Rebecca, which is our spontaneous decision makers. So these are our folks who tend to make gut decisions. They make a decision potentially quickly. If you know someone in your life, or if you're a spontaneous decision maker, people may be a little unsure where the decision came from. They're also tend to change their goals easily. So if you were someone who maybe changed your mind a lot in your undergraduate major, or have changed your interests rapidly, you may be a spontaneous decision maker. Other qualities of these folks is that they get bored easily, but they might also be willing to take risks. And so really thinking about these dichotomies of, do you think that you're an external decision maker or an internal decision maker? Do your preferences tend to lie more in that systematic, deliberate use of research and data, or spontaneous? When I know something feels right, it feels right. These are really key things to consider and reflect on as you begin your job search and engage in your career planning, because making sure that you're in preference with how you like to gather information and make decisions will make this process a lot more seamless for you. So if you're interested in exploring a little bit more about what your decision-making style is, I have a link for a really great tool. It takes about 10 minutes. And you'll get some really great information about whether you're external, internal, or spontaneous and systematic. And there's some really great recommendations that can allow you to engage in the career exploration and planning process in alignment with your preferences. So a really great example of this is, if you find that you trend towards being an external decision maker, you may really want to focus your job search on opportunities that allow you to engage with others. So thinking about informational interviewing and relying on networking for researching and learning about careers. For those of you who may find that the internal decision-making approach feels more comfortable for you, then a really great recommendation is to trend towards using a robust list of online resources for your job search and taking a data first approach. So using some of the resources that I'm going to mention shortly to really do some data analysis of the job market and having an understanding of the economic landscape. That might be how you feel most comfortable. So again, as you move through all of the great recommendations that we have for you today, and as I move into some of the resources I'm going to share with you, I really want you to think about, again, your preferences and how do I like to gather information? How do I like to analyze and process that information? information? And then how do I feel comfortable allowing that to inform my decision? Because again, I think that can be a way to make something that can be long and arduous and not always fun, a much more manageable experience in your job search if you're staying in line with those preferences. So to go more in depth on some methods of searching, so this has already been mentioned a couple of times, but professional associations are a great way to get connected to tailored job search resources. So if you're unaware of the larger national professional organizations associated with your field, that's a great place to start to get connected during this time. Another thing is using more niche job search websites. So I've included a link here, z.umn.edu/niche job search. And this is an article of 17 different niche job search sites ranging from finance through engineering to human resources. So finding again, where are the jobs of interest being pooled and where is the work being done for you already? The other thing, you may be interested in searching by organization. Following organizations in LinkedIn and Handshake is a really great way to passively get information. And by also following organizations in Handshake, you'll automatically start a job search agent that will email you when a job is posted by any of the organizations that you're following. Another really great tool that I really like using and working with students is the closest industry peers and competitors function within the library's website at www.lib.umn.edu/business. The job search is all about finding ways to gather information that you don't know. So using this closest industry peers and competitors function can allow you to see, oh, if I have an interest in working for an organization like Target or Best Buy, but maybe I don't necessarily know the landscape of other competitors that I might also want to explore, this can be a really great tool to kind of expand your list and build more knowledge around your job search. Next slide, please. All right, another great way to search is by job title. Again, looking at the Bureau of Labor and Statistics and creating job search agents. I also encourage you to reach out to your career center to see if they have a record of previously entry-level jobs that students in your college have taken. Quickly getting a list of common job titles in entry-level roles of interest is a really great way to hone your keyword search. And as Rebecca mentioned earlier, having a really strong and robust keyword search list that is informed and knowledgeable is really going to help make sure that you're finding the opportunities that you don't know about when you're researching online. Another way, can we go back to the previous slide? Thanks. One last way that you might not be thinking about engaging in your keyword search is by actually taking a look at your resume. What technical or transferable skills are showing up most often in your resume? And why you want to pay attention to that is because not only does it reflect your interests, if you continue to engage in a really specific type of skill set, it may reflect that you're a strong candidate for roles that employ that skill set. It also demonstrates what you're naturally drawn to and interested in. So again, what technical or transferable skills do you see repeatedly showing on your resume? Use that as a keyword search when you're in Handshake or in LinkedIn. I also recommend reviewing many job descriptions of interest. 30 to 40 is probably at the low end. You really want to create enough aggregate data to understand these are the common keywords that exist in job descriptions that are of interest to me. And these are the things that I'm going to want to use as I'm again doing my keyword search. Again, also highlight those particular technical and transferable skills that you're seeing in the jobs of interest to you, because that might also be an indicator of additional training, web-based training that you might want to engage in, particularly for those technical skills. Again, the goal of this activity is to really identify those broad themes and common phrases to get you more specific searches. There's a term in mathematics called garbage in, garbage out. Your keyword results can only be as strong as the searching that you're doing. And so really taking the time to step aside and reflect on your interests and what you want, and doing that research to understanding the breadth of employers that you may be interested in working with, the breadth of job titles that may exist for a similar type of job that you're interested in, and those transferable and technical skill sets that you have are all really great strategies to ensure that you're getting better results when you're searching for opportunities online. Another method that you may consider in terms of searching is the use of staffing agencies. Can we go to the next slide? And so I recently participated in a staffing agency recruiter panel. And if you want to watch that panel to hear from a wide variety of recruiters in the staffing agency world talk about the current landscape, as well as hiring trends and what the process of actually working with a staffing agency is like, this is a really great resource. We also have a Handshake article that talks a little bit more about the process of working with a staffing agency. Working with a staffing agency can be a really great option if you are a student who feels like maybe you didn't necessarily maximize the use of your career center as an undergraduate student, or maybe you feel like you really just want a more tailored approach in terms of your job search, and working with a staffing agency who is hired by organizations to find employees can be a really great way to, again, just get a little bit more support in your job search process. So something else to consider. All right, next slide. So again, I mentioned earlier, I was a 2008 grad, so this potential experience of economic uncertainty at the time of entering the workforce is something that I have personal experience with, and that hits home for me as I reflect on my career journey. And so one thing I would really just like to share with you is that applying to a job does not mean that you are committed to accepting an offer. Your goal in this job search process, especially during a recessive economy, is to collect offers. You will acquire more information about an opportunity as you go through the interview process. And so really challenge yourself. If you're looking at a job description and you feel like it could be a good fit, but you're not sure, just remember, submitting an application does not mean you're agreeing to accept the job. And you build so many skill sets going through the interview process, in addition to learning more about what you're looking for in terms of a fit and an opportunity, that I really encourage you to remain open-minded and put yourself out there as much as possible. Thanks again for being here today. That's what I have for my portion of the presentation. And I believe we're going to move into the question and answer portion now. So I'll return this back to Rebecca.
Yes, so if you have any, thank you, Rebecca Dordell. That was really great and very informative. Thank you to Marissa, Steph, and Jennifer. So if you have questions right now, please pop those into our Q&A session. We have about 15 minutes dedicated to questions and answers, and we'll take turns answering any of those questions that you have live here. So we'll just give it a moment or two and let you enter your questions into the Q&A box. Yes, this session will be recorded. It's recorded, and we'll have it on our YouTube channel. We'll also send this out to all of the participants and all of those actually who registered for today's webinar by email. So you should receive that next business day or two.
I saw that there were a couple of questions that I started answering by text related to the difference between a CV and a resume and how to list thesis or academic work. So your faculty members and your professors who've been in academia for many years, their CV is going to look very different than what an academic CV is going to look like for a recent graduate. And so my general rule of thumb for CVs is that they can be up to 2 pages long. The way that you order and organize your section title should be focused on your academic work. So an education section followed by a research section is what I would recommend. You may choose to cite, using the proper citations, the title of your thesis and a 1 to 2 sentence abstract in your education section, and then also dedicate a full description, tailored description within a research section to provide more detail beyond the topic that you studied, but the actual skill sets that you utilized when you were doing your research. So everything from the literature review to maybe potentially the lab techniques if you're more of a science-based experiment, as well as any interviewing. So again, for the social and behavioral sciences, you may have engaged in more survey development or interviewing. That's a great way to highlight those skills as well.
Looks like we have a question here. Why do some recruiting agencies require Word doc files of my resume? It feels a bit uncomfortable as they can edit my document. So I can answer that one. I would say some might require a Word document because maybe they're, maybe they're writing on the top of it, like the order, or maybe they're de-identifying who who submit that resume. Sometimes I know in my own search processes that I've been involved with, we will go in and remove the names of those who submitted the resume so that we can unbiasedly review a resume. So that might be one reason. Another reason may be, when you have it in PDF, it can be difficult for their AI system to scan it for keywords. So that might be another reason why some recruiters or jobs may prefer a Word document as well. Rebecca, do you have any other ideas as to why they might require Word documents?
Certain organizations who use applicant tracking systems, so ATS, they may, their algorithm may not be able to process a PDF. It may appear as a photo. And so sometimes they need a Word document in order to actually process and read your document. So that may be why.
Yeah. So do we have any tips or advice for people planning to transition into a new career field?
I would love to put in a plug for networking there. I think that as I reflect on my own personal experience and the motivations that one might have for wanting to transition to a new career field, it's important to make sure that those assumptions match reality. And in order to do that, you have to do some research and connect with folks in the field that you're now interested in and ask them questions like how they prepared themselves for their work, how they see their day-to-day, what motivates them, how are they evaluated in their work, and make sure that their answers truly match your motivations for wanting to make that transition into a new career field. I should have mentioned more in depth earlier when I was talking about the Maroon and Gold Network, the search tools. So you can use a lot of different search options in order to find people that match your interests. You can search by industry, by company, by major, by school. So you can get really fancy there. So I'll put in a plug for networking.
And Jennifer, did you have anything to add to this question?
That was really exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say, think about all the things that Marissa said. I think informational interviews are so important with a job, with a career shift, especially right now, so that you can find out what the areas that you're thinking about, whether they would be a good fit for you, and you can find out if you have any skills gaps or anything that you need to do so that you can be prepared to apply for jobs as you're making this career shift.
I was also going to add to that, if you can take sort of small steps as well to get a little experience and try it out. So maybe if you were able to take on a micro project in this new field that you're able to do, or maybe do a little bit of job shadowing or something that helps you in that role, like working on a project or understanding if that work would really be something that you would enjoy without having to quit the position that you're already at. That could be another thing to think about.
Great. Someone asks, I was an U of M grad in 2008 and find myself again on the job market. How do you see this recession likely to be different for job seekers?
I think it's too early to tell. I think a lot of the financial models are showing potentially kind of a V versus a W versus an L. I mean, there's a lot of people predicting whether this is going to be a blip on the radar that returns to normal once aspects of social distancing change. But I think it's really difficult to predict. There's a couple of questions coming in that kind of hit on this, is what is our advice for job searching in an uncertain time? And I would say there's so many aspects of the job search that are never in your control, regardless of what the economy looks like. For example, I will work with students who maybe have been turned down from multiple opportunities, and they've decided that they're rewriting their resume, 10 different times. And what I really ask them is to say, what information do you have that leads you to believe that your resume is the issue? Like, I really like to sit down with students or alumni and say, walk me through where you've gotten stuck in the process. The reality is sometimes it has nothing to do with you. Your materials may be fantastic, your interviewing may be great. There really just is a better fit for whatever reason. And so that's what I encourage you to think about, is that job searching during a recession may mean you need to be more open-minded. It may mean that you need to expand your geographic region search. You may need to apply to more opportunities. Plan A might not be so certain, but again, a lot of the things are the same. So really just putting yourself out there and also being very empathetic as you engage with employers right now. What's unique about this experience is it is a worldwide experience. People you are interacting with also feel uncertain about their job, are also dealing with challenges and stress. So taking the extra time as you send your follow-up thank you, as you're engaging people to wish them safety and wellness, can really show some professional and empathetic maturity that I think can make you stand out in the process right now.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
I have two things to add as well. From some of the forums that I've been following from career counselors and employers across the country, a lot of them are saying in uncertain times, it's really important to be proactive and to have a strategy. So they were saying people who really do their homework on organizations and what's going on with their organizations and are proactive in reaching out and submitting applications on time and things like that will have greater success. And being proactive with the networking is part of that. So you might need to take a little bit more of an active role to your search right now instead of passive. Another thing is finding ways to keep yourself well. I also graduated in that last recession, and this is a part that really hits home for me because, as Rebecca had mentioned, you may be turned down for quite a few things, and you might start wondering if you need to rewrite things or if you're doing something wrong or if something's wrong with you. And I know I certainly felt that way, and there can be a lot of feelings of rejection. So, but keeping in mind that things are really competitive and things are really uncertain. So it may not be you. It might mean nothing about you as a candidate or as a person. And thinking about how you're going to stay healthy and maintain some sleep or find somebody to talk to as an outlet who can bring you up during this time after feeling some rejection. All of those things are really important, because if you start feeling super negative and kind of crabby about the job search, employers can sense that on your next interviews and can sense that you're having a tough time and that you're frustrated. So maybe taking a break if you're feeling that, or finding a new strategy. Those are all really important things during these times.
Yeah, and you mentioned about dealing with being turned down in some ways. And so a question we have here is, how do you follow up after being turned down?
Mm-hmm. So I can start here and then anybody else can jump in as well. One of the things that I would do, sort of as Rebecca had mentioned, is keeping that empathy. You can certainly, thank them so much for the opportunity and that you really appreciated their time. You can ask for feedback. Some people will give feedback, some people won't give feedback. One of the questions I used to ask is, if I were to apply again, is there anything that I could focus on to help me be a more competitive or successful applicant, to show them that you're still interested in working for them? But really showing the appreciation and the empathy for their position, because they may have just had a ton of applicants that were all really equally qualified, and they really may have wanted to hire everyone, but they can only hire one person. So it might not have been anything personal.
Yeah, and I also think if you've made it through to the interview stage, I think if you've made it that far, asking for feedback. I think it's a good opportunity to ask for feedback on, what about my candidacy could I work on, or are there certain areas that you're looking for that maybe I didn't speak to? So asking for feedback in terms of your candidacy for the position would also be something that you can take with you.
And don't take it personally. Some organizations have legal restrictions in being able to give feedback to active applicants. And so that's where I really encourage you to reach out to other people in your network who can freely give you that advice. So whether that is a career coach, every college has various policies related to alumni work, but I believe we all work with alumni in some capacity. So reviewing the policies and reaching out there. Also other mentors, other people in your network, you really want to get that feedback from someone who's you know is going to be honest with you. And often in an active job search, the employer you're interacting with may not be that person.
Thank you. What is the best way to initially reach out to someone on LinkedIn or any other networking sites?
I would highly recommend tailoring and making your initial outreach personal. So you're introducing yourself, sharing just a little bit about yourself, and then being specific in why you're reaching out to that person to connect. So was it something about their educational background or their work history? The Maroon and Gold Network has templates that you can use to start as a starting point. So if you want to take a look at those, they get you started in that way. And the other thing about the Maroon and Gold Network that's important to remember is all the alumni on the platform have raised their hand and said, yes, I'm willing to help students and fellow grads in this way. So you can feel really confident reaching out, that you're going to be met with a warm response. There was another related question about how often to follow up with new connections in your network. And I think that really varies. The Maroon and Gold Network is really set up for what we like to call these flash connections, informational interviews. That might simply be a one-time interaction, but you can talk to the person that you're meeting with to set some expectations. You know, you can always say, I'd love to follow up with you in a month. Would that work for you? And more often than not, they'll say yes. But you can definitely follow up and check in every few months just to see how things are going. There was also another question about how many users are on the Maroon and Gold Network from the law school. So I just jumped over, and there are 51 users from the law school, and it's really easy to do searches for all the different colleges. So we have the College of Liberal Arts, and they have over 1,200 grads from that college. You can look by college and find people.
And I would also just like to add, this is something that I help students with because I know that making that first networking contact can be really scary and intimidating. And after you get more comfortable with it, it gets a little bit easier. So I tell students to send me their email and I'll proofread it. For my college, your other college might have resources on templates or things where they can help you. Otherwise, you can just Google too. I found an article that had all kinds of templates about how to make a networking email if you've never met the person, and how to make a networking email if you had met them but it had been a long time. And then they would give you sort of ideas and things. I think Marissa's right on with mentioning anything you have in common, like the alumni network, maybe mentioning something you saw on their LinkedIn profile that really excited you that you wanted to learn about more, and then having someone proofread that email before you send it, and then just knowing that it'll get easier and you'll get more used to it as you go.
Looks like we have one last question and then we have to close out right after that. What should a typical follow-up inquiry email look like after applying?
One of the biggest pieces of advice that I have is, especially for new graduates who may not have ever been on the other side of a search, so actually served on a search committee, often the search process can be one of the lowest priorities for an organization, especially during a time like this. So the first thing is really recognizing what an appropriate timeline for reaching out is after you've applied. So understanding, when did this job posting close as opposed to when did I apply for it? So if you haven't heard anything after 2 weeks, but the job position hadn't closed until 2 or 3 days before, then I would say give it additional 1 week to 2 weeks before you follow up. Following up is great, but again, at this time, we really recommend demonstrating professional maturity and empathy of what kind of people are experiencing in their professional lives right now. So the hiring process may slow down. And so again, just giving adequate time before you follow up, like 1 to 2 weeks. Often because the job search is out of our control, sometimes I notice that students or job seekers will allow their anxiety about the process to hurt them by, just want to make sure you got my stuff like 10 minutes after you apply. That might not be the best introduction to an employer. So again, giving about 1 to 2 weeks after that you perceive that job closed or after you applied, I think is a general good timeline.
Great. Well, thank you. Oh, thank
Sorry,
you so much. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to quick add, I also think this is where a little bit of networking could help as well to understand the field. So in some fields, it's not really appropriate to follow up, that it's kind of assumed in that field that if you submitted the application and you got that bounce back, if they're interested, they're going to contact you. Whereas other fields, it may be more appropriate and more known for people to follow up. So that could be something that you could ask your networking contacts and get a little bit of feedback or do a little bit of research about.
Yeah, thanks. That was all great information. Thank you to Rebecca, Steph, Marissa, Jennifer. This is awesome. I hope that our viewers got a lot out of today's webinar. I know I did, and I really enjoyed being able to have this conversation with our students and recent alumni, and we hope that you can listen into other future webinars that we have coming up that might be of interest in your job search. So yes, thank you everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.